You're shrinking yourself right now, this very moment. You're making yourself smaller to fit into other people's comfort zones. Stop it. You hold back your best ideas in meetings. You pretend to like movies you hate. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny. You edit your opinions before speaking. You dim your personality in groups. You compress your dreams to fit other people's expectations. You apologize for taking up space. You lower your voice when you get excited. You change the subject when you're passionate about something. All to fit in, all to belong. But here's what will shock you. You don't belong anywhere when you're not being yourself. Look at me. Listen carefully. Everything you've been taught about belonging is completely backwards. You've been told to shrink to fit, to tone it down, be less passionate, less dramatic, less intense, less opinionated, less enthusiastic, less you. But what if I told you the complete opposite is true? You don't need to shrink to fit anywhere. The right places will expand to embrace who you really are. This might disturb you, but you've become addicted to making yourself smaller. You've confused your performance with your identity. You think love comes from being agreeable, that success comes from not making waves, that acceptance requires you to edit your authentic self down to a manageable size. You're wrong, dead wrong. I've spent over 40 years studying this pattern, watching people torture themselves, trying to fit into spaces too small for their spirits, observing the slow suffocation of authentic selves. The people living the most fulfilling lives aren't the ones who learned to be smaller. They're the ones who expanded into their authentic magnificence. Here's what nobody tells you about fitting in. When you consistently shrink to accommodate others, you don't make relationships better. You make them fundamentally dishonest. You create connections based on lies about who you are. Think about this right now. If someone can only accept you when you're pretending to be someone else, do they actually accept you? If you have to hide your passions, your opinions, your natural way of being in the world, what exactly are they loving about you? They're loving your performance, not your person. As I always say, what other people think of me is none of my business. But you've made it your business. You've made managing other people's opinions your full-time career. You've become a professional people pleaser. You monitor every word before it leaves your mouth. You calculate every response for maximum acceptance. You rehearse conversations in your head. You perform instead of living. You're dying a slow, agonizing death from the inside out. Here's the devastating part that most people never realize. The more you perform this smaller version of yourself, the more you lose connection with who you really are. You start forgetting your authentic preferences, your genuine opinions, your natural responses. You become a complete stranger to yourself. Stop right now. I want you to ask yourself this question. When was the last time you expressed your genuine opinion without editing it first? When did you last show enthusiasm about something without immediately dialing it down? When did you last take up space in a conversation without apologizing for it? Can't remember? That's because you've been practicing invisibility for so long that you've literally disappeared from your own life. But here's what will change everything for you tonight. Your authentic self is not too much. You are not too intense, too passionate, too opinionated, too sensitive, too emotional, too loud, too quiet, too anything. You are exactly the right amount of yourself. The problem isn't that you're too much. The problem is that you've been trying to squeeze yourself into spaces that are fundamentally too small for your magnificence. Here's something I want you to notice right now. Every relationship in your life where you feel truly alive, where you can be completely yourself without editing or performing, exists because someone had the courage to show up authentically. And you responded to that authenticity. Now think about the relationships where you feel drained, where you're constantly monitoring yourself, where you leave feeling smaller than when you arrived, where you feel like you're walking on eggshells. Those relationships exist because someone is shrinking. Which type do you want more of in your life? Here's what I want you to understand about true belonging. It's not about finding places that will accept your small, edited, carefully controlled version. It's about expanding into your full, authentic self and discovering that the universe literally rearranges itself to accommodate your authenticity. When you stop shrinking to fit, you start expanding to belong. But this requires what I call brave authenticity. It's not enough to just decide you're going to be yourself. You have to be willing to be yourself when it's inconvenient, when it creates temporary discomfort, when it challenges other people's expectations of who they think you should be, when it rocks the boat, when it disrupts the status quo. Let me tell you something that might terrify you. There will be people in your life who prefer your smaller version. There will be opportunities that seem to require you to dim your light. There will be moments when shrinking feels safer than expanding. There will be voices telling you to be reasonable, to be practical, to be realistic. In those moments, you have to remember something crucial. Your job in this life is not to manage other people's comfort with your authenticity. Your job is to honor the truth of who you are. As I've said many times, you are not stuck where you are unless you decide to be. But you've decided to be stuck in everyone else's expectations. You've chosen to be imprisoned by other people's comfort zones. You've volunteered for a life sentence in the jail of external approval. Here's your wake-up call. The people who reject your authentic self are actually doing you a tremendous favor. They're showing you that they're not your people. They're clearing space in your life for the people who will celebrate your authenticity instead of merely tolerating it. Stop trying to convince the wrong people to love the wrong version of you. Our entire culture is set up to encourage shrinking. From the moment you're children, you're taught to color inside the lines, to raise your hand before speaking, to follow instructions without questioning, to conform to expectations rather than exploring possibilities, to be seen and not heard. You're rewarded for fitting in and systematically punished for standing out. You learn that safety comes from blending with the crowd, that love comes from meeting other people's expectations, that success comes from not making waves, that belonging requires conformity. These lessons serve a purpose in childhood, but they become prison cells in adulthood. Your job as an adult isn't to fit into existing spaces. Your job is to create new spaces, to expand possibilities, to show the world what becomes possible when someone refuses to shrink, to be a living example of authentic expansion. But this requires something that most people find absolutely terrifying. It requires you to risk other people's disapproval, to risk being misunderstood, to risk being judged, to risk being rejected for who you really are, instead of being accepted for who you're pretending to be. Here's what I want you to do starting right now. I want you to conduct an experiment that will change your life forever. For the next 7 days, in every single situation, ask yourself this question: am I shrinking to fit or expanding to belong? When you're in meetings and you have an idea, do you share it fully or do you shrink it down to something more palatable? When you're with friends and they're discussing something you're passionate about, do you contribute your authentic enthusiasm or do you dial it down so you don't seem too intense? When someone asks what you want to do you express your genuine preference or do you automatically defer to what you think they want to hear? When you disagree with someone, do you voice your perspective respectfully or do you just nod along to avoid conflict? Start noticing how often you make yourself smaller throughout the day. Pay attention to the physical and emotional cost of that shrinking. Notice how it feels in your body when you compress your authentic self to fit into someone else's comfort zone. Notice the tension in your chest, the tightness in your throat, the heaviness in your stomach. Then start experimenting with conscious expansion. Share the idea at full intensity. Express the enthusiasm without editing. State your preference clearly and without apology. Take up the space you deserve to occupy. Speak at your natural volume. Use your authentic vocabulary. Express your genuine emotions. Yes, some people might be uncomfortable with your expansion. That's not your problem to solve. Here's what you'll discover. When you commit to this practice, when you stop shrinking to fit into the wrong places, you automatically start attracting the right places. When you stop performing for people who require you to be smaller, you begin connecting with people who celebrate your full size. The universe has a mysterious way of matching your energy. When you show up small, you attract small opportunities, small relationships, small experiences. When you show up at your full authentic size, you attract opportunities, relationships, and experiences that match your magnificence. But this transformation requires something that doesn't come naturally to most people. It requires faith. Faith that who you really are is worthy of love and belonging. Faith that the right people will appreciate your authenticity even if the wrong people don't. Faith that the universe will make space for your expansion, even when it requires rearranging circumstances. As I always say, your reputation is in the hands of others. Your character is in yours. You've been spending your entire life managing your reputation instead of honoring your character. Stop managing how others see you. Start honoring who you actually are. When you change the way you look at belonging, belonging itself changes. Instead of asking, how can I fit in here? Start asking, how can I contribute my authentic gifts here? Instead of, what do they want me to be? Ask, what does my truth want to express in this situation? Instead of, how can I avoid making anyone uncomfortable? Ask, how can I honor my authenticity while still being respectful? This fundamental shift transforms you from someone who's seeking approval to someone who's offering authentic contribution. From someone who's trying to fit in to someone who's creating space for genuine belonging. From someone who's managing impressions to someone who's sharing truth. But here's what I need to warn you about. When you start expanding instead of shrinking, you're going to encounter what I call expansion resistance. The people who have benefited from your smallness won't necessarily celebrate your growth. The systems that have relied on your conformity will push back against your authenticity. The dynamics that depended on your diminishment will fight to keep you small. This resistance isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's actually a sign that you're doing something incredibly powerful. You're disrupting patterns that have kept you small. You're challenging systems that have depended on your diminishment. You're refusing to play roles that no longer serve your authentic expression. When you encounter this resistance, remember something crucial. You are not responsible for other people's comfort with your growth. You are not obligated to stay small so that others can feel big. You are not required to dim your light so that others don't feel overshadowed by your brightness. You are not meant to sacrifice your authenticity to preserve other people's illusions. The responsibility is to honor the authentic self that life has entrusted to your care, to steward your gifts instead of hiding them, to take up the space you came here to occupy, to live the life you came here to live. Here's something beautiful that happens when you commit to this path. When you stop shrinking to fit into the wrong places, you discover that the right places have been waiting for you all along. The opportunities that actually require your authentic gifts, the relationships that thrive on genuine connection, the communities that celebrate diversity of thought and expression, the work that needs your unique perspective. You've been trying so hard to squeeze yourself into spaces that were never meant for you, that you've completely missed the spaces that are perfectly designed for your authentic self. Think about the moments in your life when you felt most alive, most connected, most like yourself, most energized, most creative, most inspired. I guarantee you those moments happened when you were expanding, not shrinking, when you were expressing your authentic nature, not performing a smaller version. Those moments are breadcrumbs leading you toward your true belonging. They're showing you what becomes possible when you honor your authentic size instead of compressing yourself to fit external expectations. As I've said, when you judge another, you do not define them, you define yourself. But you've been judging yourself more harshly than anyone else ever could, deciding that you're too much, too intense, too different, too challenging, too demanding, too sensitive, too ambitious. Stop judging yourself. Start celebrating yourself. Consider the legacy you're creating with your daily choices. Every time you choose to shrink, you're teaching the world that your authentic self isn't valuable enough to take up space. Every time you choose to expand, you're demonstrating that authenticity is worth more than approval. You're modeling courage for everyone watching. Which legacy do you want to leave? Which message do you want to send to the people who look up to you? Which example do you want to set for the next generation? What do you want to teach your children about the value of authenticity versus the cost of conformity? The world doesn't need another person who has learned to make themselves smaller to accommodate other people's limitations. The world desperately needs you at your full authentic size. It needs your unique perspective, your specific gifts, your particular way of moving through life, your distinctive voice, your individual contribution. You came into this world as a completely original creation. Don't leave as a copy of what other people wanted you to be. Here's what I'm asking you to commit to tonight. Not to me, but to the authentic self that's been waiting patiently for you to remember who you really are. Commit to honoring your authentic size. Stop apologizing for who you are. Quit performing smaller versions of yourself to make others comfortable. End the exhausting charade of being less than you are. Commit to expanding to belong instead of shrinking to fit. Commit to finding your tribe instead of changing yourself for the wrong tribe. Commit to creating space for your authenticity instead of squeezing into spaces that are too small for your spirit. The people who truly belong in your life will expand to make room for your authenticity. The opportunities that belong on your path will match your authentic energy. The experiences that belong in your story will resonate with your true self. The work that belongs to you will require your full authentic presence. But you have to give authenticity a chance. You have to risk being fully seen as you really are. You have to trust that who you are is worthy of love, belonging, and celebration. You have to believe that your authentic self is a gift to the world, not a problem to be solved. As I always say, you have everything within you that Buddha had, that Christ had, that every great teacher who ever walked the planet had. That includes the courage to be authentically yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you into someone else. Here's your moment of truth. Right now, in this moment, you have a choice. You can continue shrinking to fit into spaces that are too small for your soul. Or you can begin the magnificent work of expanding to belong in the vast, beautiful life that's been waiting for your authentic presence. The choice is yours and yours alone. What will you choose?